The morning that changed everything. Ethan woke up to a morning that felt like any other. Calm, predictable, and deceptively ordinary. The kind of morning where the world seemed to hum along in perfect harmony, giving no warning of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The sunlight streamed through the blinds in soft, golden streaks, painting the kitchen counter in warm hues. Outside, the faint chirping of birds blended with the distant hum of traffic as the city slowly came to life. Standing by the counter in his old, comfortable robe, Ethan cradled a steaming cup of coffee between his hands. He inhaled deeply, letting the rich aroma fill his senses. This was his favorite part of the day, the quiet before life demanded his attention. The house was still, save for the rhythmic clicking of Sophia's heels against the hardwood floor, as she moved through their shared space with her usual efficiency. Sophia was a vision of elegance as always. Her hair cascaded in perfect waves down her back, and her makeup was applied with the precision of an artist. She wore a tailored navy dress that hugged her figure just right, paired with heels that added an air of authority to her already commanding presence. She had always been like this, polished, poised, radiant. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. Ethan watched her from across the room with a soft smile tugging at his lips. For a moment, he allowed himself to admire her. The way she absent-mindedly adjusted her necklace in the mirror. The way she bit her lip in concentration while rummaging through her bag for something she couldn't find. She was beautiful. She was his. But lately something had shifted. It wasn't anything overt or dramatic. No shouting matches or slammed doors, but Ethan felt it deep in his gut. A subtle change in the air between them, like a song slightly out of tune. It was in the way she avoided his gaze when he asked about her day, or how she seemed to linger on her phone just a little too long. It was in her laughter, once free and full-bodied but now restrained, like she was forcing it for his benefit. He tried to brush it off at first. "You're imagining things," he told himself over and over again. But doubt has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, planting seeds that grow into something impossible to ignore. "Hey!" Sophia called out suddenly, snapping him out of his thoughts. She stood by the door now, one hand on the doorknob and the other clutching her designer handbag. "I might be home late again tonight. Big project at work." Ethan nodded automatically, though his chest tightened at her words. "Sure," he said casually, masking his unease with practiced ease. "Don't work too hard." She flashed him a quick smile, a smile that once made his heart race but now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely, and turned toward the door. But just as she was about to step out, she froze mid-motion. "My phone," she muttered under her breath, patting her pockets with growing urgency. "Where is my phone?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the counter where it sat next to his coffee mug. A sleek black device that seemed almost out of place amidst their otherwise cozy kitchen decor. He picked it up without thinking and held it out to her. "Don't forget this," he said lightly, forcing a smile onto his face. For a split second, so brief it could have been imagined, Sophia froze too. Her hand hovered in midair as if debating whether or not to take it from him. In that fleeting moment, Ethan saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? He couldn't quite tell. "Oh," she said finally with an awkward laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I don't have time to grab it now, I'll be late for my meeting." And just like that she was gone. The door clicking shut behind her before Ethan could process what had just happened. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone still clutched in his hand like it was some kind of forbidden artifact. His mind raced with questions he didn't want answers to. Why didn't she take it? What was she hiding? Was he imagining things again? But this time felt different. This time felt real. He set the phone down on the counter like it might burn him if he held on to it any longer and took a deep breath. His heart pounded against his ribcage so loudly he swore he could hear it echoing through the empty kitchen. "Don't do it," he whispered to himself as if saying it aloud would make him believe it more. "Don't cross that line." But then came the memories, the little moments that had been gnawing at him for weeks now like termites eating away at a foundation until all that remained was doubt and suspicion. He thought about all those nights she came home late smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't hers. All those times she smiled at her phone but wouldn't share what was so funny. All those excuses about work dinners and last-minute meetings that never quite added up. The weight of it all pressed down on him until he felt like he couldn't breathe anymore. Before he knew what he was doing, Ethan picked up the phone again, this time with purpose, and unlocked it with trembling fingers. The screen lit up instantly, casting an eerie glow across his face as Pandora's box opened before him. For a moment, he hesitated again, his thumb hovering over the messages icon as doubt crept back into his mind like an unwelcome guest. What if I'm wrong? What if there's nothing here? What if this destroys us? But curiosity, or maybe desperation, won out over fear, and Ethan tapped on the icon anyway. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Texts from coworkers about deadlines and meetings, messages from friends asking about brunch plans, even a few spam emails offering discounts on skincare products Sophia would never use. But then he saw it, a thread buried halfway down her inbox labeled simply, Chris, work. His stomach churned as he clicked on it without thinking twice. The messages started innocently enough. Small talk about projects they were working on together. Jokes about office gossip. Compliments exchanged back and forth like harmless banter between colleagues who got along well enough but nothing more. But then they took a turn, a dark turn. A turn Ethan never saw coming even though part of him had been bracing for this moment all along. Last night was amazing. One message read from Chris. I can't stop thinking about you, said another from Sophia. Ethan's hands shook so badly now that he could barely hold onto the phone anymore as message after message unfolded before him like pieces of evidence in some twisted trial where love stood accused alongside betrayal itself. I wish I could see you tonight. I miss your touch. I hate lying to him. Each word hit Ethan like a freight train barreling straight through whatever remained of his once perfect world until all that was left were shards too jagged for anyone, not even someone as strong-willed as him, to piece back together again. He set down Sophia's phone slowly, as if putting it back would somehow undo everything, and stared blankly at nothing in particular while trying desperately not to fall apart completely right there on their kitchen floor surrounded by sunlight too bright for such darkness inside him now taking root where love used to grow instead. This expanded version adds vivid imagery and emotional depth, while maintaining suspense and tension throughout Ethan's discovery process. It meets your 1,500-word requirement by elaborating on key moments and internal conflicts without losing focus on the core narrative arc. The devastating discovery, betrayal unveiled. Alright, let's dive into the moment where everything Ethan thought he knew about his life comes crashing down. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens when the foundation of your world crumbles beneath you, leaving you standing in the wreckage, gasping for air. It's about Ethan and the discovery that changes everything. Picture this. Ethan is still sitting at the kitchen table. The coffee in his mug has long gone cold, but he hasn't noticed. His hands are trembling as they grip Sophia's phone, a sleek black device that now feels heavier than it should. The house is silent, almost unnervingly so, as if it knows what's about to unfold. The sunlight streaming through the blinds feels harsh now, exposing every crack in his carefully constructed reality. He stares at the screen, the words in front of him blurring as his mind races. He doesn't want to keep scrolling, he doesn't want to see more. But something inside him won't let him stop. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing you shouldn't look down but unable to resist the pull. The thread with Chris, work, is still open. Those two words, so innocuous on the surface, now feel like a cruel joke. At first, the messages seemed harmless enough. Great job on the presentation today. Lunch tomorrow? But then, like a storm rolling in on an otherwise clear day, they shifted. Last night was unforgettable, Chris wrote. Ethan froze when he first read it. His heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else, the ticking of the clock, the distant hum of traffic outside. He scrolled further, desperate for answers yet terrified of what he might find. I can't stop thinking about you, Sophia replied. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. They were playful, intimate, dripping with a kind of affection Ethan hadn't seen from her in months, maybe years. It was like reading someone else's love story. Except it wasn't someone else. It was Sophia, his wife, and Chris. Ethan felt his stomach churn as he read on. I wish we could spend the whole weekend together, Chris said. Sophia responded with a heart emoji and a promise. Soon. That one word, soon, echoed in Ethan's mind like a taunt. Soon? What did that mean? How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told him to keep this secret? And then he saw it. The message that shattered whatever hope he had left. I love you. It was from Sophia. Those 3 words she used to say to Ethan every single day, were now meant for someone else. Someone who wasn't him. Someone who had stolen her away while Ethan was too busy trying to hold their life together. He set the phone down slowly, his hands trembling so badly he could barely breathe. The room felt too small, too suffocating, like the walls were closing in around him. He wanted to scream, cry, punch something, but instead he just sat there staring at nothing, feeling like a man who had been gutted and left for dead. Memories flooded his mind. Memories of their wedding day when Sophia looked at him like he was her entire world. Memories of lazy Sunday mornings spent laughing in bed. Memories of holding her hand during moments of joy and sorrow alike, promising her they'd always face life together as a team. And now? Now it felt like all of that was a lie. A beautiful illusion shattered by the cold reality of betrayal. Hours passed before Ethan finally moved again. He picked up Sophia's phone. Not out of curiosity this time but out of determination. If she thought she could hide this from him, she was wrong. Dead wrong. He started screenshotting everything. The messages, the photos they'd exchanged, and sent them to himself as evidence. He didn't know what he'd do with it yet, but something inside him told him this wasn't over. As he scrolled through more messages, patterns began to emerge. Patterns that made his blood boil even more than before. Chris wasn't just some random guy. He was someone Sophia worked with every single day. Someone she probably mentioned casually over dinner, while Ethan sat there clueless about what was really going on. The affair wasn't new either. It had been going on for months behind Ethan's back, while he was busy working late nights and planning family vacations, and doing everything in his power to be a good husband. And worst of all, Sophia didn't seem even remotely guilty. Not in her texts anyway. She laughed at Chris's jokes like they were sharing some private world Ethan would never be part of. She made plans with him like their future together was inevitable. Ethan felt sick, physically sick, as all these realizations hit him at once. But amidst all the pain and anger and heartbreak swirling inside him, there was one emotion that rose above the rest: resolve. Because if Sophia thought she could destroy their marriage without consequences, if she thought Ethan would just roll over and accept this betrayal, she had another thing coming. The next few days were excruciating for Ethan. He went through the motions of daily life, went to work, smiled at coworkers who had no idea what was happening behind closed doors, but inside he felt like a man teetering on the edge of collapse. At home he watched Sophia more closely than ever before. He noticed how she avoided eye contact whenever he asked about work or her late nights at the office, how she clutched her phone tightly whenever she thought he might be looking at it, how she always seemed nervous when she left for meetings that didn't show up on her calendar. And then one night, while Sophia was asleep beside him, Ethan made his move. He took her phone from where it sat charging on the nightstand and unlocked it again. This time searching for anything that might give him more answers than those messages already did. What he found was worse than anything he could have imagined. Photos of Sophia and Chris together at restaurants. Emails detailing plans for secret weekend getaways. Even voice recordings where they talked about how much they loved each other. How much they hated lying to Ethan but couldn't bring themselves to stop. By the time Ethan finished going through everything, his hands were shaking so badly, he could barely put her phone back without waking her up. The next morning, Ethan finally confronted Sophia. Not with anger or accusations but with quiet determination. "I know," he said simply as she sat across from him at their kitchen table looking confused and scared all at once. Sophia tried to deny it at first, tried to tell him that he misunderstood or misinterpreted what he saw, but Ethan didn't let her get away with it this time. "I saw everything," he said firmly but calmly. "The messages, the photos, everything." Sophia broke down into tears then, real tears this time, and admitted everything. How she met Chris at work, how their friendship turned into something more, how she never meant for things to get this far but couldn't bring herself to stop once they did. Ethan listened quietly as she poured out her heart. Not because he forgave her but because part of him still loved her despite everything she'd done. And when she finally finished talking, when there was nothing left for either of them to say, Ethan made his decision. "I'm leaving," he said softly but firmly as Sophia looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks and wide eyes full of regret. "I can't stay here anymore. Not after everything you've done." And just like that, Ethan walked away. Not because it was easy, but because sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself from drowning in someone else's mistakes. The message: betrayal isn't just about losing someone you love. It's about finding yourself again after they've torn you apart. The final act: Ethan's masterpiece of revenge. Let me tell you about the moment Ethan stopped being the man who begged for answers and became the man who wrote his own. You think betrayal is the end of the story? No, it's just the beginning. Because what Ethan creates out of his heartbreak isn't just revenge. It's a symphony of justice played note by note, with Sophia as the unwitting star of the show. Ethan doesn't sleep that night. He sits at the kitchen table, illuminated only by the cold glow of his laptop screen. His coffee sits untouched, forgotten, as he dives into a world of possibilities. Social media accounts, bank statements, dating apps. He's not searching for more clues. No, he already knows the truth. Now he's building something else entirely. A plan. You see, pain has a way of transforming people. For Ethan, it sharpens him. Every memory of Sophia's laughter, every whispered promise of forever, every anniversary toast. It all hardens into fuel for the fire now burning inside him. A fire that refuses to be extinguished. He starts small, precise, surgical. First, he opens a secret bank account and begins siphoning money from their shared savings. Just a little at a time, unnoticeable to anyone not paying attention. Next, he cancels their joint credit cards and freezes their loyalty points. The ones they'd saved for a tropical vacation Sophia had insisted they postpone for work reasons. Now he knows what those reasons really were. But that's just the overture. The real genius begins when Ethan stumbles upon Sophia's calendar. Among the usual meetings and gym sessions is an entry labeled Team Retreat, Lake Tahoe. The dates are circled in red. Curious, Ethan checks Chris's Facebook page, public, because Chris clearly thinks no one is watching. And there it is, a photo of Chris grinning in front of a ski lodge with the caption, "Counting down the days." Ethan leans back in his chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. If this is their stage, then it's time for him to write the script. That night he hires Mara, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and results. She's all business. Sharp eyes that miss nothing and a voice like gravel. "I need photos," Ethan tells her as he slides a folder across the table. "Hotels, dinners, anything that proves they're more than coworkers." Mara flips through the printouts of messages Ethan has compiled, each one damning in its own way, but her expression never changes. "This'll cost you," she says flatly. Ethan hands her an envelope stuffed with cash. Money he'd been saving for Sophia's birthday gift. The irony isn't lost on him. But here's where Ethan's plan becomes truly diabolical. Instead of confronting Sophia outright, he becomes the perfect husband. He cooks her favorite meals, lasagna with extra cheese just how she likes it, and pours her wine before she even asks. He surprises her with tickets to the symphony, knowing full well she'll cancel at the last minute. He even starts wearing that cologne she bought him years ago, the one she said reminded her of their honeymoon. Sophia eats it up. She thinks he's trying to save their marriage, and maybe part of him is, but every kiss on his cheek, every compliment about his cooking, he files it away like evidence in a case he's building against her. The night before her retreat, Ethan insists on packing her suitcase himself. He folds her silk negligee, the one he'd bought for their anniversary, and tucks it into the side pocket with deliberate care. "For our next getaway," he'd told her at the time. Now he imagines her wearing it for Chris instead. And instead of breaking him, the thought fuels him. As Sophia sleeps soundly beside him that night, Ethan picks up her phone, left carelessly charging on the nightstand, and forwards every incriminating message to Mara. Then he deletes any trace from her sent folder. Let Sophia think she's getting away with it. Let her grow comfortable in her lies. The morning Sophia leaves for Lake Tahoe, Ethan stands in the driveway waving like a lovesick teenager as she drives off into her fantasy life with Chris. But as soon as her car disappears around the corner, Ethan pulls out his phone and sends 3 quick texts. To Mara, they're on their way. To his lawyer, initiate phase 2. To a local florist, deliver roses at 7 p.m. sharp. Now let me tell you about those roses. Dozens of blood-red blooms arrive at Sophia's hotel room that evening with a note attached. "Thinking of you. Love, Chris." Except Chris didn't send them, Ethan did. He wants Sophia paranoid. He wants her looking over her shoulder every second she spends with Chris, wondering when and if the truth will catch up to them. Meanwhile, back home, Ethan transforms their house into something out of a romantic movie montage. He strings fairy lights across their backyard, the kind Sophia always wanted but never got around to buying herself, and sets their wedding china on the dining table alongside vanilla-scented candles, her favorite. To anyone watching from outside, it looks like a man desperate to rekindle his marriage. But Ethan isn't desperate anymore. He's methodical. When Mars photos arrive, grainy but damning shots of Sophia and Chris holding hands at gas stations and kissing outside restaurants, Ethan doesn't flinch. He forwards them to himself under carefully labeled folders, Exhibit A through Z. Then he pours himself a glass of whiskey and raises it in a silent toast to no one but himself. To betrayal, he murmurs into the empty room. And everything it teaches you. Here's what Ethan understands now. Revenge isn't about rage or impulsiveness, it's about patience. It's about becoming the spider instead of the fly. So he waits. He waits while Sophia texts him fake updates about team-building exercises at Lake Tahoe cabins. He waits while Chris posts smug Instagram stories featuring mountain views and roaring fireplaces, with no mention of who took those photos. He waits until everything is perfectly aligned, and then he strikes. The night before Sophia returns home from her retreat, Ethan logs into her work email, password, their wedding anniversary, unchanged since they got married, and forwards every detail about her trip to Chris's wife. Yes, you heard that right, Chris has a wife too. The email includes screenshots of messages between Sophia and Chris along with Mara's photos as attachments. The subject line? Thought you'd want to know. Satisfied that phase 2 is complete, Ethan logs out and erases any trace of his activity before sitting back in his chair with an exhale that feels more like liberation than exhaustion. This isn't just revenge anymore. It's art. When Sophia finally walks through their front door 2 days later, sun-kissed from Lake Tahoe and smiling like nothing has changed, Ethan greets her warmly. "Welcome home," he says softly as she steps inside. Completely unaware that everything she thought was secure has already begun unraveling behind her back. Because this is only Act 1 of Ethan's masterpiece, the final confrontation. The night everything changed. Let me set the scene for you. It's a Sunday evening, the kind of night where the world feels quiet, as if holding its breath. The air is crisp, carrying the faint promise of spring, but there's still enough chill to make you crave warmth. Inside the house, Ethan stands in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a glass of wine in his hand. The table is set. Candles flicker softly, casting golden light across plates of lasagna. Everything looks perfect. Too perfect. But this isn't a romantic dinner. This is a reckoning. And Ethan? Ethan is ready. The clock ticks closer to 7 p.m. With every passing second, Ethan feels the tension building inside him like a storm about to break. He's rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times. Every word, every pause, every calculated look. But now that it's here, he feels something unexpected. Calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but the kind that comes from clarity, the clarity of knowing you've already lost everything worth losing. There's no fear left when you've hit rock bottom. And then he hears it, the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. The engine cuts off and for a moment there's silence. Ethan takes a deep breath, steadying himself as he hears her heels clicking against the pavement, each step bringing her closer to the door. When Sophia walks in, she looks radiant, her hair perfectly styled, her cheeks flushed with what she'll probably call a long day of meetings. She smiles when she sees Ethan standing there in his button-down shirt and slacks, holding a bottle of wine like some picture-perfect husband from a magazine. "Wow," she says, setting her bag down on the counter. "What's all this?" Ethan smiles back at her. A smile so practiced it almost feels real. "I thought we could have a special night," he says smoothly, pouring her a glass of wine and handing it to her with steady hands. "You've been working so hard lately. You deserve it." Sophia laughs softly and takes the glass, sipping it as she glances around the room. "This is really sweet," she says cautiously. "You didn't have to do all this." "Oh," Ethan replies with a slight tilt of his head. "I wanted to." They sit down at the table together and for a moment, for one fleeting moment, it almost feels normal. Sophia talks about her trip, or rather, She spins an intricate web of lies about team-building exercises and networking opportunities. She weaves her story with such confidence that anyone else might believe her. But not Ethan. Not tonight. Tonight, every word out of her mouth feels like poison dripping into an already tainted well. He nods at all the right moments, even smiles occasionally, but inside he's counting down to the moment everything shatters. And then it happens. As Sophia reaches for another bite of lasagna, her favorite dish, Ethan clears his throat softly and leans back in his chair. "There's something I need to show you," he says calmly. Sophia looks up at him, fork halfway to her mouth. There's confusion in her eyes. Confusion and something else, fear? "What is it?" she asks hesitantly. Ethan doesn't answer right away. Instead, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out an envelope. A plain white envelope that seems harmless enough until he slides it across the table toward her with deliberate precision. "Open it," he says simply. Sophia hesitates for a moment before picking up the envelope with trembling hands. She glances at him nervously before pulling out its contents. Photos, grainy but unmistakable, of her and Chris together at their hotel in Lake Tahoe, holding hands at dinner, kissing outside their room, smiling like they don't have a care in the world. Her face goes pale as she flips through them one by one, her breath hitching in her throat as realization dawns on her like thunder after lightning. What is this?" she stammers finally, looking up at Ethan with wide eyes. Ethan leans forward now, his elbows resting on the table as he locks eyes with her, and for the first time all night, there's no trace of warmth left in his expression. "You tell me," he says coldly. Sophia opens her mouth to speak, to deny it or explain it away, but no words come out because what can she possibly say? The evidence is right there in front of her. A damning testament to everything she thought she could hide. She starts again before trailing off helplessly. Ethan doesn't let her off the hook. Not this time. "How long?" he asks bluntly. Sophia blinks at him like she doesn't understand. Or maybe like she wishes she didn't understand. But Ethan doesn't wait for an answer. "How long have you been lying to me?" he demands now, his voice rising slightly but still controlled enough to send chills down her spine. Sophia swallows hard before finally whispering, "It wasn't supposed to happen." Ethan laughs bitterly, a short sharp sound devoid of any humor, and shakes his head incredulously. "Wasn't supposed to happen?" he repeats mockingly before leaning back again with an exasperated sigh. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" he continues after a pause, his tone dripping with disbelief mixed with anger mixed with heartbreak all rolled into one. "You didn't just trip and fall into someone else's bed by accident. You made choices, deliberate choices, to betray me over and over again." Sophia flinches visibly under his words but doesn't try defending herself anymore because deep down even she knows there's no excuse good enough for what she did. Not now, not ever. The rest of their confrontation is raw and messy and painful beyond words. A storm of anger and regret and shattered trust that leaves both of them emotionally drained by the end of it all. And yet amidst all the chaos lies clarity. A brutal kind of clarity that forces both of them to face truths they've been avoiding for far too long. By the time Sophia finally leaves, or stays depending on how this story ends, one thing becomes clear above all else. This isn't just the end of their marriage. It's the beginning of something new entirely for Ethan: freedom. Freedom from lies. Freedom from betrayal. Freedom to rebuild himself from the ashes Sophia left behind. Because sometimes, losing everything is how you find yourself again. The new beginning. Rising from the ashes. Let me take you to the moment where everything comes full circle. The moment where Ethan's journey shifts from heartbreak to triumph, from betrayal to rebirth. This isn't just about moving on. It's about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and his happiness. It's about turning pain into power and writing a new chapter that's as inspiring as it is satisfying. It's been weeks since that unforgettable confrontation. Weeks since Sophia sat at their dinner table, her lies unraveling like thread pulled from a worn-out sweater. Weeks since Ethan watched her crumble under the weight of her own betrayal. And now Ethan stands in the middle of his living room, surrounded by neatly packed boxes stacked against the wall. But this isn't sadness he feels, not anymore. This is liberation. You see, Ethan didn't just survive Sophia's betrayal. He transformed because of it. He took every ounce of pain, every sleepless night, every tear shed in silence, and forged something stronger. Because when life knocks you down, you have two choices: stay there or rise back up. Ethan chose to rise. Let's rewind for a moment to the days immediately following Sophia's departure. At first, Ethan felt like he was walking through a fog, a thick, suffocating haze of anger and grief. Every step felt heavy, every breath a struggle. He spent hours replaying their confrontation in his mind, dissecting every word she said and every word he wished he'd said differently. He questioned everything: his choices, his worth, even his ability to trust again. But then something shifted. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, just a quiet realization that crept in during one of those long, sleepless nights. A spark ignited deep within him. It started small but grew brighter with each passing day. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was resolve, a fierce determination to rebuild. Not just his life but himself. And so Ethan got to work. The first step? Finalizing the divorce papers. There was no room for negotiation, no drawn-out discussions about what could have been. Ethan wanted a clean break, a fresh start unburdened by the weight of Sophia's deceit. When she tried to plead for one more chance, Ethan stood firm. "I gave you every chance," he told her calmly but resolutely. "And you threw them all away." Next came the house, their shared space filled with memories both beautiful and bitter. Many people might have sold it and walked away, but not Ethan. No, this house wasn't just a symbol of their past. It was also a canvas for his future. He repainted the walls with bold colors that reflected his newfound strength: deep blues for serenity, fiery reds for passion, and vibrant yellows for hope. He tore out old furniture that no longer felt like him and replaced it with pieces that did. He even planted new flowers in the garden, bright reds and yellows that bloomed defiantly against the backdrop of winter's lingering chill. Each change was small on its own but monumental when taken together, a declaration that this was no longer their home, it was his. But Ethan didn't stop there. He started running again, something he hadn't done in years, and found solace in the rhythmic pounding of his feet against the pavement. With every mile he ran, he felt himself shedding layers of pain and doubt until all that remained was clarity. He joined a local writing group and poured his emotions into poetry, raw, unfiltered words that bled honesty onto every page. Writing became his therapy, his outlet, his way of making sense of everything he'd been through. He reconnected with old friends, people he'd drifted away from during his marriage, and rediscovered the joy of simply being seen and valued for who he was. And slowly but surely Ethan began to feel whole again. And while Ethan was busy rebuilding himself, Sophia's world was falling apart. You see, Chris wasn't exactly Prince Charming. Not by a long shot. And when his wife received Ethan's carefully timed email, complete with photos and messages, she didn't just confront him, she exposed him publicly. Suddenly Chris wasn't just the guy from work, he was the guy who destroyed 2 marriages. His reputation plummeted faster than anyone could have predicted, and before long he found himself alone, abandoned by both women who once thought they loved him. As for Sophia, well, karma has a way of catching up with people whether they're ready or not. Her friends turned cold, her family grew distant, her career took a hit she couldn't recover from. Not because Ethan sought revenge but because truth has consequences. And while she struggled to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, Ethan thrived. Not out of spite but out of sheer determination to move forward with grace and dignity. Fast forward to today. Ethan stands surrounded by boxes filled with remnants of a life he's leaving behind. Not with sadness but with closure. One box catches his eye. It's labeled wedding. Inside are photos from their big day. Sophia laughing as they cut the cake. Ethan beaming as they danced under twinkling lights. Guests raising glasses in celebration of what everyone thought would last forever. Ethan picks up the box carefully and carries it out to his car. Not because he wants to hold on to those memories, but because he's ready to let them go. This isn't just an ending. It's a beginning. A chance to write a new chapter filled with hope and possibility. As Ethan drives away from the house one final time, windows down, music blasting, he feels something he hasn't felt in months: peace. Not because everything worked out perfectly, it didn't, but because he worked out perfectly. Through all the chaos and heartbreak and uncertainty, Ethan found himself again. And isn't that what life is really about? Finding yourself, even when everything else falls apart. So here's to Ethan, to his strength, resilience, and ability to turn pain into power. Here's to new beginnings, and to the beautiful messes that make them possible. And here's to you, because if Ethan can rise from the ashes stronger than ever, so can you.